Major fallout after the U.S. makes a huge policy shift in its stance towards Israel, a long-standing and key Middle East ally. The Obama administration choosing not to veto a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlement expansion in Palestinian-claimed territory. The U.S. abstained from the vote instead, a stunning break from past practice that allowed the measure to pass despite intense lobbying from Israel and President-elect Donald Trump. John Huddy has the very latest on what happens now from Jerusalem. Hi, John.
Well, Elizabeth, first of all, there's been, as you can imagine, and as we all know, a great deal of fallout from this vote, from the United States to here in Jerusalem to the West Bank, where Christmas celebrations are going on right now in Bethlehem. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the resolution, quote-unquote, shameful, while Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas described it as a, quote, big blow to Israeli policy. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu released a statement after the vote saying, quote, Israel rejects this shameful anti-Israel resolution at the UN and will not abide by its terms. At a time when the Security Council is not doing anything to stop the slaughter of 500,000 people in Syria, it disgracefully gangs up on the one true democracy in the Middle East, Israel, and calls the Western Wall occupied territory. Now, the resolution passed 14 votes to 0, with the U.S., as mentioned, abstaining. It demands that Israel cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. And the U.S. envoy to the UN, Samantha Power, said that Israel's settlements undermine Israel's security. Listen.
One cannot simultaneously champion expanding Israeli settlements and champion a viable two-state solution that would end the conflict. One has to make a choice between settlements and separation.
And along with Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas, the PLO's Secretary General Saeb Erekat described yesterday as a historic day with, he said, a clear and unanimous message to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
This is a day where the international community have utterly rejected the settlement activities, the policies of dictation, the policies of apartheid being employed by the current Israeli government.
Now, the resolution also states that the settlements have no legal validity. Well, President-elect Donald Trump, a strong proponent, as we know, of Israel, tweeted out after the vote, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. Elizabeth.
All right, John Huddy reporting live. John, thank you so much. Certainly a polarizing issue. So here for a fair and balanced discussion about how this will change the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, Brad Blakeman, who is a former advisor to President George W. Bush, and Doug Schoen, who advised President Bill Clinton. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you.
You both worked in different administrations, which is partly why we think this is absolutely perfect for this topic. I want to start with you, Brad. I'm curious as to your take as the dynamics as we look forward. We see the dynamics of the relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama really come to a head as we're transitioning to President-elect Donald Trump. What is your take on the events that took place yesterday?
Well, friends don't take friends to the UN Security Council. Israel is an oasis in a sea of despair and terror. Israel should be our closest ally, and the United States should not be cowardly and abstain. This is the last slap in the face of Barack Obama, not only to the Prime Minister of Israel, but to the people of Israel on the eve of Hanukkah. This is absolutely unacceptable. I would use stronger language than the Prime Minister of Israel in condemnation. But things will change after January 20th. We're going to respect our friends and be close to our friends like Israel because they are the true allies of America in a troubled region.
Okay, you
we
said
shouldn't
that
be
you
punishing our friends.
You would use stronger words. So let me read part of his reaction in part and get Doug's reaction. The Prime Minister writes in part, the Obama administration not only failed to protect Israel against this gang up at the UN, it colluded with it behind the scenes. Israel looks forward to working with President-elect Trump and with all of our friends in Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, to negate the harmful effects of this absurd resolution. Doug, your reaction?
Oh, I would agree. I mean, I don't know what the collusion was specifically, but let's just say a day after Donald Trump was able to negotiate with the Egyptians to withdraw the resolution, 4 non-permanent members of the Security Council put it back on the agenda right away. I believe the U.S. could have and should have done more to stop it. But what the Prime Minister said about bipartisanship is where I would really like to begin. I'm a Democrat. I worked for Bill Clinton, but I am a staunch supporter of Israel. I've worked for at least 3 Israeli prime ministers. This will retard the peace process. This will make war more likely, and this divides Israel and the United States. Fortunately, Donald Trump is becoming president. He will reverse this policy. I am certain after January 20th, and the world will be better off. Israel will be better off as a result.
Okay, I want to see if you both agree on this, because there has been some reaction to Trump's interference. Appropriate or inappropriate? Brad, I want to start with you.
It's absolutely appropriate.
But one president at a time, no?
It is appropriate for him to speak out. In less than a month, he's going to be our president. It's absolutely mandatory for him to say something when our country has done something so disastrous to the relationship, not only with Israel, but the stability of one of the most troubled regions in the world. So yes, I applaud Donald Trump for speaking out, and this sends a signal about the change that will take place when he's our president.
Okay, what do you think, Doug? Because there's been some criticism that it's a standoff there, that he's stepping on President Obama's toes.
Well, and normally I would want to and tend to agree. There's a big but. This upsets settled American policy. 8 years of, steadfast veto and blocking these type of resolutions. To do this, as Brad said, right before Christmas and Hanukkah is an outrage. And with the president also having put a ban on offshore drilling, it looks to me like President Obama is effectively trying to usurp Donald Trump's authority. I'm very glad the president-elect said and did what he did. It's right, reasonable, and responsible. And I'm confident we will be back on an even keel after January 20th.
Well, that brings me to my last question. And Brad, I want to give you the last word. As we move forward, what can be done to perhaps get some of the emotions down, bring down the temperature after this?
Well, I think what Donald Trump should do is reach out immediately to the state of Israel when he's president and start a new course of dialogue that will bring the parties together. But remember, Donald Trump understands better than anybody else, a deal is only as good as it is for both parties. Both parties must get something out of the deal. And by the way, we have to be fair dealers in saying that first and foremost, our allegiance is to the state of Israel. That's where America's allegiance should be.
All right, well, Brad and Doug, go ahead.
My parting shot would be, we do need a peace process, but under traditional terms to reach a 2-state solution. What happened yesterday will retard, not advance that prospect.
Okay, some very interesting points and perhaps more agreement than we suspected. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Leland?
A lot of bipartisan agreement about this. President-elect Trump's latest tweet may be a preview of U.S.-Israeli policy after he takes office, saying, quote, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th, that, of course, being Inauguration Day. Zoom out. It may also be a succinct metaphor for the differences between the current administration and the next one. Garrett Tenney outside the president-elect's Florida estate, where Mr. Tenney, along with Mr. Trump, are celebrating Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas Eve, Garrett.
Merry Christmas to you, Leland. We are celebrating Christmas together. I'm sure the Trumps will be inviting all of us in for Christmas morning with the children. Until that happens, though, I can tell you, it's clear, looking over the last few weeks and all the way back to the campaigning, President-elect Trump does plan to shake things up when he comes to Washington, but even before then, he's not planning to wait until he takes office to do that. Most recently, you can just look at this week in that UN vote with Israel. Now, we've seen him repeatedly weigh in on U.S. foreign policy, even when it contradicts the administration And again, we saw that just a couple of days ago. Now, after the U.S. refused to use its veto powers to protect Israel, Mr. Trump released a statement criticizing the U.S.'s decision and previewing how U.S.-Israel relations will change. His statement reads in part, "The resolution being considered at the United Nations Security Council regarding Israel should be vetoed, as the United States has long maintained peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians will only come through direct negotiations between the parties and not through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. This puts Israel in a very poor negotiating position and is extremely unfair to all Israelis." Then on Friday, Mr. Trump reinforced the changes to come with a tweet stating, "As to the UN, things will be different after January 20th, and as you mentioned, that is when he will be taking the oath of office." This week, in another indication of possible changes to come, Mr. Trump also indicated that the U.S. needs to upgrade its nuclear arsenal. And yesterday, incoming White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the president-elect is sending a clear message to world leaders.
I think countries need to know that under a Donald Trump presidency, business as usual is over. He's going to act. He's going to protect America. And if they increase their nuclear capability, America will act.
And the president-elect does not have any scheduled meetings or events today. We do not know any specifics on his plans for the rest of the week. And we can tell you, however, that last year when he was here in Palm Beach for Christmas, he did go to Mass. He may decide to do that again. Leland?
Garrett Tenney covering it all outside Mar-a-Lago. Thanks, Garrett. If you get invited in for Christmas, let us know. All right, moving on. One moment, President-elect Donald Trump has... See, and sometimes they roll that. A Fox News alert as we are continuing to cover sort of the differences here between President Obama's worldview and President-elect Trump's worldview. We bring in Jillian Turner, formerly with the National Security Council, and now with Fox News as a contributor. You saw the Bush to Obama transition at the NSC. It was a change in foreign policy, a change in worldview, but doesn't seem as drastic of a change as what we're seeing now between President Obama and now President-elect Trump 8 years later.
Well, I think that, you know, the traditional foreign policy the United States has conducted for the last 50 years is most certainly going to be sort of turned on its head with the start of the Trump administration in a month from now. But we don't actually yet know a lot of the concrete steps that he's going to take to get us there. Meaning, President-elect Trump has done a very good job of laying out his vision and his kind of strategic goals, but we're pretty thin on the particulars right now. And a lot of times the devil's in the details. So what I mean to say by this is that he has very big goals.
At least in this idea, though, in terms of Israel, the Israel-Palestinian conflict in Israel with respect to the UN, he was very clear that this should have been vetoed and that Israel has been put in a bad position, and I would have done things differently if I was in the White House.
Absolutely. And it is the, you know, as we all know, it's the commander-in-chief's prerogative to guide that foreign policy. I think that there's no bones about the fact that the UN, for example, is going to have a much sort of smaller role in a Trump administration as compared to the Obama administration, which greatly expanded it since the George W. Bush days.
I mean, there's at least some reporting out there by Haaretz, one of the big Israeli newspapers among others, that President Obama was intimately involved in this decision on Thursday and Friday while he was on vacation to abstain from this vote. Larger picture, what message does this send our allies who are all of a sudden watching this shift in power and trying to figure out, to your point, somebody who has broad, big ideas, but perhaps the nitty-gritty details aren't figured out?
I think that okay, so a couple of things on that. One is that I think it's now clear to everybody that a change is coming. I think it's clear to everybody that Donald Trump is very eager to kind of flex his muscle and show that he wants the United States to kind of reassert its leadership on the global stage. But the caution, I think, for an incoming administration is that there's a lot of sort of rights that come along with being elected and being the soon-to-be commander-in-chief, but there's also a lot of responsibilities, and one of those is to maintain the dignity and respect of the office at all times, meaning it's also incumbent upon the president-elect to not impede upon President Obama and undermine his policies right now. So he's got to really tread carefully and balance that here.
In another place, we've seen this real split between President Obama and President-elect Trump is when it comes to the issue of Russia and sort of this idea, is Russia our friend or is Russia our enemy? Should we get along or not? This coming from President Putin's letter to President-elect Trump. Quote, I hope that after you assume the position of President of the United States of America, we will be able, by acting in a constructive and pragmatic manner, to take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as bring our level of collaboration on the international scene to a quantitatively new level. Sounds like a long way of saying the famous reset button from the other side.
So I hate to be the Grinch because it's Christmas Eve day, but
we all know that's sort of your general personality.
My prediction for this relationship is that it's great that President-elect Trump has lofty aspirations to have closer bilateral relationship with the Russians, but he's not yet dealt with President Putin as a head of state counterpart. And once he does, I predict that he's going to come to the same conclusions that every president for the last 50 years has come to. And that is that you actually cannot trust the Russian regime as far as you can throw a stick. They have lied their way through the world stage, everything from their invasions of Georgia and Ukraine over the past year to the humanitarian crisis they've now precipitated by inserting themselves into the civil war in Syria, to sponsoring state terrorism around, being a state sponsor of terrorism around the globe. I think that once the president has to actually deal with Putin as a counterpart, his estimation of him is going to change. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I say certainly we all would hope that you're wrong.
We would hope that, exactly.
Although, as
I
Mark
hope
Twain
that I
would
come
say,
back here a year from now and we're talking about how wrong I was and that the Russians have changed and Vladimir Putin has become a sort of responsible world leader.
Well, you know,
that's my hope for the new year.
We typically have you back. It's a good hope, but we typically have people back who are right, as you usually are. But we'll mark the tape, and if you're wrong, we'll talk about it.
All right.
Thanks, Jillian. Merry Christmas. Elizabeth?
All right, great interview. The best military money can buy could cost U.S. taxpayers $618 billion next year. President Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing that level of spending for more troops and higher pay, even though it didn't give him one of the things he wanted and promised to voters, which is the closure of the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay. Lauren Blanchard has been looking at the very fine print, and she joins us with the very latest. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Liz. Well, while President Obama signed the $618 billion measure into law, he took the opportunity to attach a lengthy signing statement, essentially a few parting shots from the outgoing president. In a statement writing, I am also disappointed that the Congress again failed to enact meaningful reforms to divest unneeded force structure, reduce wasteful overhead, and modernize military health care. Most notably are restrictions on transferring Gitmo detainees. Mr. Obama will leave office in a month after failing for 8 years to shutter the prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The president promised to close the jail when he first ran for office, but he was never able to fulfill that goal. President Obama says failing to shut the prison makes Gitmo, quote, a permanent fixture of our struggle against terrorism. And a controversial provision backed by Democrats that would require women to register for selective service was left completely out of the bill. The president says he signed the bill because it, quote, provides vital benefits for military personnel and their families and includes authorities to facilitate ongoing operations around the globe. It also authorizes a troop pay increase of about 2.1%, even though Mr. Obama only requested a 1.6% pay raise. To put that in context, that's about $550 more per year for junior level enlisted troops and $1,800 for mid-career officers. It also bolsters the number of troops in the Army, Marines, and Air Force. The grand total is about 23,000 additional troops. Mr. Obama initially wanted 16,000. The bill will take effect on January 1st. Liz?
All right, Lauren Blanchard reporting live. Lauren, thank you so much. Leland?
Well, more than 103 million Americans will take planes, trains, automobiles to go over the river and through the woods to Grandma's house for end-of-year holiday travel. That is the most ever, according to AAA. And now the bad news. With snow and freezing rain expected to slam parts of the country, get ready for some travel headaches. You can see the snow there by New York and a long line of rain from Dallas all the way up through Memphis. Air train service to Newark Airport was shut down yesterday afternoon, stranding some passengers and forcing others to make their way to the terminal on foot. And you can see a lot of folks dragging their bags there trying to make a flight. Thankfully, the air train, we're told, that's the air train stuck. is now back working, we're told. And more than 6 million people will fly this holiday. Video from Denver International Airport, where security wait times were just about 30 minutes long. But officials say leave 2 hours before your flight just to be safe.
All right, coming up, sorry in so many ways. A star college football player apologizes for attacking a woman, but why is he still on the team? And a small town epidemic fueled indirectly by big money drug companies. How a public health crisis is affecting one of the most rural in the state. And small acts of kindness for the tiniest victims of man's inhumanity. The spirit of season crosses all borders where hope is in such short supply.
Giving them a Christmas that the way it used to be before they were either displaced or refugees.
Well, as we've been following, the Obama administration is defending its decision not to veto a United Nations resolution on Friday condemning Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. Our own White House correspondent, Kevin Corke, joins us from Hawaii, where the first family is vacationing this holiday week. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, good to talk to you. You're right, a stunning decision that continues to reverberate across the globe. But of course, the administration is going to continue to push back as well, saying that, listen, this doesn't mean that we've had a change in our posture and in our relationship with our most important ally in the region. But no matter how you spin it, people are still shaking their heads and wondering what in the world happened in New York yesterday at the United Nations. The president, we are told, came to his decision after several rounds of consultation with key members of his team, including UN Ambassador Samantha Power and Secretary of State John Kerry. Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes said while the U.S. didn't agree with all the resolution, it was a signal for both sides that they need to do more to ensure a peaceful process toward a two-state solution.
When it comes to final status issues, we believe that those should be negotiated between the parties. And at a certain point, the words and the actions become irreconcilable. And that's what we're concerned about.
Obviously directed at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose relationship with the president has been, well, let's just say complicated at best. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee says while this is part and parcel for the UN, this is a pretty big mistake by the president.
It's also policy that American presidents don't change a long-standing, 4-decade-old policy about vetoing these kind of actions at the United Nations in the waning 30 days of his tenure. Let me just tell you, the UN, it's time for us to stop sending money down that rat hole. These are a bunch of mosquitoes pretending to be eagles, and they have no business trying to determine what other countries do in their own sovereign nation.
Administration officials continue to point out the fact that, listen, we just wrapped up a $38 billion aid package to Israel, a great military cooperation, so in no way does this signal a major sea change in that respect. But I'm sure, at least in Jerusalem this morning, that might ring pretty hollow. Elizabeth?
All right, Kevin Corke reporting live from beautiful Hawaii. Kevin, thank you so much.
Back here at home, President-elect Donald Trump's proposed $1 trillion infrastructure plan has Congress taking sides, and not exactly the sides you might expect. Republican lawmakers are in sticker shock, while top Democrats, like incoming Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, are on board. Here to break down the plan, Trump economic advisor, Fox News contributor Steve Moore. Steve, always nice to see you. Merry Christmas Eve.
Merry Christmas, guy. I want to go to Hawaii. I want Kevin's job.
I know. I think you got to get into a long line, my friend. We'll work on getting you a little snow in Chicago, though. To this, you and I have talked.
You can see we don't have the white stuff yet.
Yeah.
Here,
no.
so
Well,
we're waiting for it tonight.
We'll be working on that. Maybe Santa will bring it. On to economics here. As we look at Mr. Trump's economic plan, and specifically its infrastructure plan, you've been on this program a lot. You've sort of many times really argued against these kinds of massive federal government spending programs. Why is this different?
Well, there's a big difference, Leland, between infrastructure, especially private infrastructure, which has a return on investment and makes. But
what does private infrastructure mean? We keep hearing this tossed around.
I'll tell you, when companies build factories and plants, and there's all sorts of energy projects that could be built with private money. So I'm making a distinction here, Leland, between the kind of old-fashioned public works projects, which Obama spent, hundreds of billions of dollars on. Remember all those shovel-ready projects that didn't really create many jobs at all. versus really smart infrastructure, a mixture of public and private. So when people throw around that $1 trillion number, they think, oh, taxpayers are going to have to pay for $1 trillion of spending. I don't think so. I'll give you just one example of a project that is hugely important for our infrastructure that's not going to cost the taxpayers a dime, and that's the Keystone XL pipeline, which is something that's been held up for 5 years by Obama and Hillary Clinton. We could get that going literally in the first month after Donald Trump takes the oath of office. And I would submit to you there are dozens and dozens of other projects like that. So smart infrastructure is what I'm for.
But and there's a big but here in terms of whether or not you're going to get congressional approval for a lot of these smart, as you call them, infrastructure projects. Why is it that Republicans are very tepid to get behind this? They're still talking about sticker shock, whereas it's Democrats who are saying, hey, this sounds great. And I'm guessing that if Democrats and Republicans may be talking about slightly different things here, because
I think that's exactly right.
Go ahead.
I think you nailed it. That Republicans are saying, look, we're going to build a network of pipelines around this country. We need LNG terminals so we can export our oil and natural gas. We need refineries in this country. I live in Virginia. We have a privately funded toll road where it was built with private money. It's paid for by the tolls the people use it, so that didn't cost the taxpayers a dime. Given the fact, Leland, that we're still running nearly $1 trillion a year deficits, we've got to find ways where we can really leverage that private sector funding for these projects. We don't want to build, what we don't want is the bridges to nowhere in Alaska. We don't want, $70 billion high-speed rail program in California. Those kinds of things are a waste of money.
Oh, come on, but it's so much quicker to get to Vegas then. When you hear things like, when you hear Chuck Schumer saying, oh yeah, I'm totally for the Trump infrastructure plan, though, do you think he's going to be for the infrastructure plan you just discussed or the bridges to nowhere?
Well, that's a great question. You might have to ask him that question. But I will say it's going to probably be a combination of both. I would love to see a jobs bill from Donald Trump right out of the gate with his business tax cut that you and I have talked a lot about on this show. And then you add some of the infrastructure spending that the Democrats want. I would envision maybe a jobs bill that you could get passed in the first 100 days that does some infrastructure spending, those business tax cuts that are so important for growth. I'm excited about 2017, Leland. I think we could see a burst of growth, 4% growth, which could put a lot of Americans back into jobs. And I want to see Democrats vote for that. I don't want to just do it with Republican votes. I want to do it in a bipartisan way. We'll see if Chuck Schumer wants to cooperate.
You know, Steve, it's a perfect place to end. You were the first person I ever interviewed as an anchor on Fox News. That was Christmas 2013. And you said, I'm cautiously optimistic. And I remember you crossed your fingers.
Are you sure about that?
I'm positive. I'm positive. And now you don't have to cross your fingers, and you are optimistic.
Exactly.
Good to hear. Nice to talk to you, sir. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
You too.
All right. Thanks, Steve. All right. Speaking of Christmas morning, wake up and watch this. Don't miss Fox News Sunday. Tomorrow morning, one of Trump's most outspoken supporters, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, joins Chris Wallace. Check your local listings for airtimes tomorrow.
And some terrifying video for you. You can see here, it's one family, a toddler in China. It was all captured on video. A 3-year-old was riding his tricycle when a truck ran a red light, hitting the toddler and dragging him under the wheel. Thankfully, the little boy walked away with just minor injuries. Authorities were able to reunite the little boy with his mother after getting him from under the truck. But pretty startling video there. And still ahead, why some drivers are fuming as Arizona opens its border to a California reject.
I think this is a sign of Arizona being a welcoming place, not only to people but businesses.
And who is ultimately responsible for the uptick in our nation's opioid epidemic? As the families grieve the loss of addicted loved ones, a new investigation sheds light on pill mills and big corporate profits in one of the hardest hit states.
Despite telling all the medical professionals and the medical personnel that she was a recovering addict, when Jessie was discharged, she was given 50 oxycodone pills. That night, Jessie died.
And I go from group to group to group. What's your biggest problem? Heroin, heroin, heroin.
A little over 1,800,000 people. The drug wholesaler shipped 200 million pain pills to my state of West Virginia.
All right, more than 33,000 Americans died from heroin and prescription drug overdoses last year, according to the CDC. One of the hardest hit states is West Virginia. An investigation this week by the Charleston Gazette-Mail followed the link between big money pharmaceuticals, pain clinics, and so-called pill mills. So we're joined by Eric Ayer. He uncovered the story. He joins us now from Charleston, West Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I want to bring our viewers up to date. We have some new information. Just yesterday, there was a $44 million settlement nationwide that was brought in by the DOJ with one of the biggest prescription distributors. I want to read in defense so they can get their part in. A statement they released, it reads in part, "To combat the scourge of opioid abuse successfully, this must be a collaborative effort that includes all parties." The statement went on to talk about regulators, also manufacturers and those who produce medications, along with doctors and pharmacies. I want to get your reaction to the news of the day when we hear of this settlement, and also moving forward, the new lawsuit that was also brought.
Well, that stemmed from a investigation in 2012, and they just reached a settlement. The interesting thing is that same company, Cardinal Health, a couple years earlier had also been sanctioned by the DA. And so this is nothing new, and there's other companies like McKesson Corporation that's paid $150 million.
I want you to set the scene for us.
$150 million fine.
Because we look at some of the numbers here, and I can put up a full screen, when you look at the prescriptions that are going, and this is just to West Virginia. From between 2007 and 2012, oxycodone dosages up to 224 million, hydrocodone 555 million. We're seeing more than 1,700 fatalities related to overdose. So you set the scene in your investigation on just how much medication is going to a small state, relatively speaking, as far as population is concerned.
It amounts to about 430 tablets of those two opioids that you just described for every man, woman, and child in West Virginia. And what was most interesting is that a lot of these shipments were going to the small pharmacies, the mom and pop, the independent, locally owned pharmacies. They weren't necessarily going to the Rite Aids and the Walgreens and the Walmarts. You had one case where we had a pharmacy in a town of 400 people that received 9 million doses of hydrocodone alone, 9 million doses in a town of 400 people. And that was just over 2 years.
Okay, so for our viewers at home, when you say that there's 9 million going to this small area, this population, who is ultimately responsible? Because not only are we seeing a lot of hands-involved drug companies, we're seeing lawmakers, we're seeing the actual pharmacies themselves, but also the doctors prescribing that. There's a lot of people who are seeing these statistics. Why is nothing getting done?
Well, you have a situation where you have rogue doctors that are prescribing. You've got pill mill pharmacies that are dispensing the medications. You've got these drug distributors, wholesalers that are shipping the drugs, and you also have the manufacturers. So you have all of them working together. It seems that none of them want to take responsibility, however.
Moving forward, do you feel as if there will be action? Tell me a little bit about the new lawsuit that's just been filed.
Yeah, in the poorest county in West Virginia, McDowell County in West Virginia, it's about 28,000 people. It's a drug-ravaged county, very impoverished county, and yesterday they filed suit against the drug wholesalers and a local physician that was prescribing an excessive number of pain pills. So it's finally the counties are trying to strike back or fight back against these forces.
All right, Eric, well, we appreciate you joining us. Please stay on the story. As you said, 9 million pills to one county seems absolutely startling, so please stay on it for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, they thought it was their annual trip to see the Nutcracker, and then there was this Christmas surprise. We'll tell you what it is, and more of the reaction coming up. Plus, he's made his list. He's checking it twice. Exclusive video you can see of the big man pulling out. We're going to check on his journey coming up next.